Electric bikes are very much part of our normal day-to-day life, and they're here to stay. Now, you probably have seen them out on your local trails, maybe delivering takeaway food or being used by locals as a form of transportation. And they're even being raced in a World Cup series. No, not like a DoorDash win all World Cup, but enduro riding. Now, this might not sound like a big deal, but it's a level of prestige that seemed a long ways away that first time we saw e-bikes rolling around a muddy field for the inaugural e-bike World Series. With that being said, riding e-bikes, while they are loads of fun, is different than riding a normal bike. And not only because of how it changes the character of the bike by adding a reasonably substantial amount of weight. Now, that isn't anti-e-bike, it's just that the weight gain is a fact. For instance, if you strapped 8 kilograms of sandwiches and drinks to your top tube for your mid-ride snack, that would also have a similar effect. Simply put, weight placement in the chassis or body of the bike can change how it rides, whether for good or bad. Perhaps you've seen downhill racers adding literal weights to their bikes or on their wheels. In this instance, it worked great, making the bike more stable or balanced. So, this got me thinking, what other options are there to explore if we want a power-assisted ride without the compromise of a significant change in how the bike feels on trails? Off the top of my head, there are 3 options. Number 1 is a green option, or eco version, where we outsource the power, so to speak, to a somewhat intelligent, maybe even artificial being. We simply fit a power meter to the cranks. We've got the head unit on the bars here to moderate my output, while I get a nice bump up the hill via this long cord. Henry, set us at 150 watts, would ya? I said 150, not 50. The pros of this system are, of course, that it's a biodiverse organic system that is run solely off chocolate raisins and Gatorade. The cons are its unpredictable nature, how noisy it is, and how sometimes it's not as reactive as I would like in a given situation. Number 2, isn't quite so green, and it does change certain elements about the bike's setup. While we tried to make it blend into the frame, if you look carefully, you'll probably make it out. It does a pretty good job of packing away, and you can ride those descents with only a small amount of wide-eyed fear and 15 kilos on your back. However, it's noisy, it uses gas, and it isn't as sleek as something like option 1. Number 3, probably the best one yet. It combines the organic characteristics of number 1 with the innate nature of number 2, and basically does the same thing without boring me about the latest and greatest bottom bracket standards.
Now, it might seem arbitrary going to a decimal place, but the proof is in the pudding. I mean, don't get me started on press fit, or should I say, press unfit. Now,
Let's go, Chris.
I love
Let's go. Good boy. This system works well. In fact, it does a great job of providing consistent traction, intuitive feel, and it's highly water resistant. The main problem is squirrels and a willingness to go off trail. So I guess what it boils down to and what we're really looking for is to keep this, the character of a modern mountain bike, but complement it with a dash of assistance. Much like seasoning on your meal, it should be there to support and not override the taste of the food it's going on. So let's see how this could be done by taking a closer look at the modern lightweight e-bike. Offerings of lightweight e-mountain bikes has definitely expanded over recent years. And much like how heavier, full power e-bikes have key players that provide systems to mini brands, it's the same with lightweight e-mountain bikes. One of the bigger players in this regard is German brand TQ, and if you've never heard of them, well, they've been around for about 30 years in the aerospace, robotics, and medical worlds, designing loads of different electronics. Now, even though they've been in the e-bike business since 2008, Their vision with the TQ HPR50 motor is to offer the halfway house between complete analog bike and the full power e-bike us riders associate more commonly with. TQ are actually supporting this video today. However, there will be many trends and patterns throughout the discussion that will ring true across the genre. So what we firstly need to understand is that to achieve a natural, subtle joy of mountain bike riding experience, we quite simply don't want the full-bore, balls-to-the-wall power of a regular e-bike with somewhere in the range of a 630 watt-hour battery size. In comparison, this particular battery is about half the size, sitting at 360 watt-hours. Let's go back to a word I mentioned earlier, complement. Now, to achieve that natural feeling that we're after, we want our motor to complement our efforts. We also need to make the motor and battery relatively small. Now, it's likely that we all know in recent years, batteries have either gotten smaller or increased their capacity for the same size, which is impressive. But the battery alone won't solve all of our problems. Another problem we need to solve is making the motor itself smaller and more responsive at the same time. A big e-bike motor typically puts out a very fast RPM, something that's too fast to match with our own cadence and too fast to blend into any rider's experience, full e-bike or not. To adjust for this, it's required to run the output of the motor through something that's termed a reducer. It's this reducer that brings the revs, or RPM, down to match with how our body works and produces our own power. There's one small issue. Similar to cassettes, planetary geared rear hubs, and gearboxes, these reducers can get very big very quickly. So not only are things heavier and more complicated, but it's also more impactful to the bike's overall feel and design. Not to mention the potential to add noise. And that is where the harmonic pin ring comes in. It's a reduction device that sits in line with the motor and means that the entire motor can fit behind the profile of a chainring. Because this reduction can take place in one step as opposed to several, this can all be done without the moving parts. It can be constructed and aligned right over the axle of the cranks. Suddenly, we have a motor that's smaller, that can give us instant power because it doesn't divert through a gear or belt drive system, and that fits within the silhouette you might expect of a typical mountain bike. It's also worth factoring the reduction ratio, so how many revs the reducer is taking to match the motor's output with ours. The lower the ratio, the quieter the motor will be. Say you have a lightweight e-bike that has a low reduction rate. The speed of the motor is then closer to the speed of the cranks. Alternatively, on some heavier, more powerful bikes, it could mean that the motor is spinning nearly 50 times more than the rider's cranks are turning. On a motor like this particular one, it's far less and is around a third of the rate. Much like revving a car very high, more revs are noisier than when it's revving slower. All right, let's think. We've got the motor, we've got the reducer, but why on earth would a motor brand ever be in a position where less is more? I mean, surely, if we're going through the cost and complexity of creating an assisted bike, don't we want the most amount of power? For all these reasons, weight, comfort, noise, design freedom, riding characteristics, the list goes on. The lightweight e-mountain bike has filled the void and is here to stay. They can give natural and familiar handling without feeling like you're gonna completely explode above the red line or blow off the trail. In the sea of options when it comes to high-powered e-bikes, the lightweight e-bikes, such as the ones equipped by TQ, are about bringing riders back together. Thanks so much for watching today's video, and I hope you learned a thing or two about lightweight e-mountain bike motors. Subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more.